Assalamu alaikum. This is Muqtada Khan. I'm a professor at the University of Delaware. I'm today going to address the issue of the Supreme Court of the United States legalizing gay marriage in all the 50 states. Today, gay marriage is universal as far as the United States uh, of America is concerned. So, how should Muslims respond to this decision by the US Supreme Court? First of all, we must, as American Muslims, recognize that we have very little political influence in this country in order to be able to respond effectively to Supreme Court decisions. So it's not a question of whether American Muslims can reverse this decision of the Supreme Court or whether we can shape the public opinion of this country on that issue. More powerful forces on the right in this country with billionaires in their stables are unable to stem the tide of public opinion, which is increasing in favor of accepting gay marriages in the United States. So, having said that, how should American Muslims respond to this decision of the Supreme Court? But before I address that issue, I must also remind American Muslims that this is the same Supreme Court that a week before it made gay marriages a new civil right in the United States, it also made a decision in favor of a woman who wore hijab and was fired by Abercrombie and Finch. So, in that sense, we must recognize, as American Muslims, that the Supreme Court has made two fabulous decisions in accepting and recognizing the personal dignity of both Muslims and people from the gay community or same sex marriage. Uh, so, how do American Muslims now think about this court decision? There are two issues upon which we need to reflect, talk about it. There is already an emerging debate within the American Muslim community. According to some polls, about 42% of American Muslims are in favor of same sex marriage, while others are not. So, how do we respond? I think there are two issues that American Muslims need to reflect upon. One is homosexuality and Islam itself. Number two is how should American Muslims, as a community living in the United States, respond to the decision of their Supreme Court? And I want to emphasize their Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States is as much our Supreme Court as anybody else's. On the issue of Islam and homosexuality, given the current understanding of Islamic sources, both the Quran and the Hadith, a vast, significantly vast majority of Muslim scholars will tell us that homosexuality is a sin, based on the story of Prophet Lut in the Quran. In chapter 7, verses 80-81, and elsewhere in the Quran, and many other traditions from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's a slam dunk case. It is very difficult to say that homosexual acts are not sinful within the context of Islamic values. So at the moment, it is impossible for any Muslim scholar to come out and say that homosexual acts are accepted within the Islamic ethos. However, you can parse them, as some scholars have done in the recent past, where they have actually tried to point out that all that Islamic law forbids is a particular kind of homosexual act or sexual relationship between two men. That is sodomy, and then everything else is, the sources are really silent upon that. So, as long as sodomy is prohibited by Islamic law, and if gay marriages entail that particular sexual act, then homosexual marriages and homosexual relationships would also not be acceptable within Islam. It is in this context, I don't think I am qualified to advance new ijtihad on this particular issue. But I do want to point out that law and politics are inseparable, and in as much as a legal opinion within the Islamic context is religious, it is also a political opinion. For example, in the last 70, 80 years, the Muslim Brotherhood and its intellectuals have always argued that the Islamic State and Islamic political system is superior to the Western notions of democracy and Western concepts of democracy. The Salafi trend within the Islamic tradition actually labeled democracy as kufr. But after 2011, after Hosni Mubarak was removed from power in Egypt, everybody in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood as well as the Salafi groups, embraced democracy with guts. And suddenly, as far as the Salafis were concerned, for example, democracy was not kufr. So they reverse their theological position because it suited their politics. So we must recognize that it is quite possible in the future. People may find clever and intelligent ways of getting around texts. So Muslims have invented methodologies like istihsan and others to escape the literal meaning of the text in pursuit of higher goals, etc., such as maqasid al-sharia. So it is quite possible that some intelligent and creative theologian in the future may make the argument about it. I don't know, wallahu alam. So as far as the theological position is concerned, at the moment, the orthodox and mainstream Muslim position is that homosexual acts are sins. Having said that, how should American Muslims respond politically to this issue? I am a strong believer that political equality cannot be realized without accepting the moral equality of all human beings. We cannot treat somebody as politically equal to us if we treat them as morally inferior to us. So if Muslims maintain this moral superiority towards people who are in same-sex marriages, then it's very difficult for them to treat them politically equally. Secondly, American Muslims themselves are a minority that feels oppressed and marginalized, just as the LGBT community feels oppressed and marginalized by the mainstream community. So it would be hypocritical and also counterproductive for American Muslims to come out and campaign against Islamophobia, demand that the rest of the country in the United States help Muslims fight Islamophobia and help Muslims get equal rights under the law, and then turn around and also make a case for discriminating against another community, the same-sex marriages community, the homosexual community, the LGBT community, and say that we want you to help us fight Islamophobia, and we also want you to help us promote homophobia. So Muslims cannot combat Islamophobia while themselves being purveyors of discrimination against any other minority. But in order to be able to treat everybody in this country as equals, Muslims have to understand that they will also have to treat them as morally equal. You cannot maintain moral superiority towards somebody and then try to also believe that you can be politically equal. The Supreme Court essentially has eliminated sexual profiling in this country. We need the help of the same court and Americans to also eliminate racial and religious profiling in this country. So Muslims have to understand that they have competing interests on this issue, where their narrow theological interpretations can undermine their broader theological and political interests. And for that matter, I think it is important for American Muslims to start recognizing that even within the Islamic context, homosexual acts, though undesirable, are not, as some Christians put it, an abomination. They do not merit a hudud punishment. They do not, if you are a homosexual Muslim, it does not mean that you cease to be a Muslim. Being straight is not a requirement of Iman or Islam. It's very clear what you need to do to be a Muslim, or what you need to believe in order to be a Muslim. So in that sense, Muslims should understand that, well, people commit sins. And that's one way of getting around it. Or we don't treat people who gamble as politically unequal. We do not marginalize them from society. American Muslims also do not believe that consumption of alcohol, for example, is okay. We think it is a sin, but we do not discriminate against people who drink alcohol. So similarly, I think at the moment, before, until and if at all, there is new theological position on homosexuality, American Muslims should also treat the religious sin as just a religious sin, keep it out of the political realm, and and extend to GLBT Americans what the American Supreme Court has finally done after 250 years, treated them equally under the law, extended the promise of treating everybody as equal under the law now after 240 years, and American Muslims should do that. God says in the Quran, Karramna Bani Adam, we have invested the children of Adam with fundamental human dignity. God has invested friends, their fellows, their students, their children, that all human beings, whether white or black, Muslim or non-Muslim, straight or gay, have fundamental human dignity invested in them by God, which nobody can take them away, an individual or a state. And so we should respect and work as a moral community in this country towards preserving the fundamental human dignity of all people. Finally, I also want to remind people that in this month of Ramadan, our job is to work towards the well being of everybody. God says, if the son of Adam comes to me with sins as large as the mountain, I will forgive him. And I think it is important for us to worry more about the sins that we commit and other sins. Our marriages are beginning to reach terrible levels in terms of divorce rates among Muslims in the United States. The level of Muslim engagement on social justice is not there where Islam hopes that Muslims will be. Our level of giving charities, our efforts towards building our own communities where issues such as domestic violence do not occur. So we have many other issues on which we can work towards finding equality, dignity, and social justice for everybody. There is a lot of poverty in America. American Muslims can dedicate themselves to combating the poverty in this country and helping those who are poor and marginalized, rather than trying to focus on depriving people of fundamental rights which they have got after centuries. So that is my message to you. Wallahu alam. Take it or leave it. Thank you.